Okay, so my name is Cassandra Figueroa, you know that. I am 31. I am in recovery. I am 4 years sober.
Yeah.
I have 4 kids. I go to school at Grand Canyon University. I have a collection of gnomes all over my house. So
oh my
that's
gosh.
A little
How long
bit
have you
fun.
had the collection?
Actually, this last year, because, quick little thing about me, I was never able to keep plants alive. And now I have a collection of indoor plants and outdoor plants. So I thought they would go well with my gnomes, and I started getting indoor plants and little gnomes that are all throughout my house. So they just kind of peek in my cupboard or where my dishes are.
Aww.
And yeah, they're my little cuties.
So I'm curious about the plants. What do those plants, do they mean something for you? Being able to have plants, being able to keep them alive, what does that mean for you?
It's a big thing for me, that and my dog. So I did things backwards. I was taught in recovery, you first try to get plants, you keep them alive for some months, and then you get an animal. If you're able to keep that alive, then you get into a relationship, right? That way you work on yourself throughout recovery. Yeah. So I did things opposite, of course. I had a baby, got into a relationship, and I was never able to keep plants alive. They would die on me. I would overwater them, drown them. And that first plant that I was able to keep alive, it's a marigold plant. Yeah. And I felt like I was on another step of my recovery, because I'm able to be more caring on that part. I feel like externally I can be very caring, but that's more of an internal instinct to water them and care for them. Yeah. And now I think I have about 9 plants that are alive, and they have been alive. So for me, it signifies that there's growth, and I'm able to be more attentive, and it's my own growth for myself. So I water it, I nurture it. It's something that I have to tend to, and that's just a reminder for myself, because I think I don't do that sometimes.
Yeah, that's a beautiful metaphor. And maybe other people, for other people as well, thinking about that. And I think it brings up we're starting about thinking about positive things towards your recovery. Let's think a little bit about language, because you're talking about recovery. We're using words like opioid use disorder, substance use disorder. When was the first time you really heard those kinds of maybe positive words towards recovery as opposed to some stigmatizing words?
I think once I got out of prison, because I had tried recovery before. I had actually been to rehabs in Mexico, because in Mexico your family can sign you in and they can keep you in. Here I wasn't successful. I would leave the treatment centers and I wouldn't complete my treatment. So my family, I remember reaching out to my grandma and asking her, I told her honestly, I said, I'm not gonna make it here. Can you please help me find something? I was thinking like Tucson, Sierra Vista. So one day they called me, they said that they were taking me to Mexico to meet up with them, and I actually ended up in a rehab. I ended up there, and I went there 3 times, but there was a very different culture. They weren't using these words. It was a little bit more of that tough love. We're gonna help you, we're gonna love you through this, but in a different kind of love, more adult love. So once I went to prison, I was already...
Can I ask a question about that?
Yeah.
I'm just wondering, was it sort of like the idea of tearing you down to build you back up?
Right. Yes.
Yeah, so tell me about sort of why that wasn't effective, or what does, what was effective, what wasn't effective about that?
I think I'm very neutral, because I think that might help some people. Where I was at in my recovery, so I was coming off of the streets. I was maybe 90, 100 pounds soaking wet. I had been homeless. I was going through all of this stuff. I had lost my kids. I was very heavy at this point going into treatment. And when I went in there, what I felt that as is like, I can manipulate this way. I'm this young girl that needs this attention, so let me try and manipulate the situation so they won't be that tough on me, and they'll be tougher on other people, right? Because I needed that love. So I wasn't ready at that time. I was manipulating my treatment. I was manipulating my grandparents, telling them what they wanted to hear so they can get me out of there as soon as possible. So that's why it wasn't effective for me, because I wasn't ready yet.
Yeah,
and they were
really important, that readiness.
They were keeping me in there forcefully. I know with great intention. I asked for the help, but it wasn't working for me because in my mind I was just like gaining that power by manipulation, which is not concrete and it's irrational, but in my head that's what I was doing during those treatments.
Tell me about what you mean by I wasn't ready. What does that mean?
I wanted to get off of drugs. I knew that I hated what I was doing. I wasn't ready because I didn't know how to cope with life yet. I was just being put in there. I was taken care of. I was given food. I was given somewhere to rest. I would hang out with the other girls, but there was no skills that were being taught. Like, how am I going to be responsible? Life skills. How am I going to do all of these things in life? Because I already thought I knew how to do that. Yeah. I thought I had the solution already. Like, no, I'm just going to stop and I'm going to do it. So I was getting therapy. I was seeing a psychologist. I was having group therapies, but there was never like that talk of guidance. Like, you need to relearn what you're doing because it's obviously not working. And there was never really talk about trauma. It would be talked about in the individual therapy, but I never understood what trauma was.
So let's talk a little bit about what trauma means to you, because you said learning what that means, what it means for you, and how does it lead to your recovery, or how does it inform your recovery?
So if I can say now what I think trauma is, I think it's something that impacts your life that doesn't let you live it to the full efficiency of something. It's like a barrier. It's something that impacts me, and I can give examples. One of the traumas that I had was that my parents separated when I was 6 years old. Another trauma was like the character changing characters in the family, like knowing too much information about what was going on in my parents' life, and not supposed to be knowing. Like, I was a kid and I knew all of this stuff that was happening.
So it was too much.
Yeah, it was too much. Other traumas are the emotional neglect. Like, that's not part of the ACEs score, but it's that in-between traumas that I think affect a lot. Like, that emotional needs weren't being met. I had a home, I had food, I had clothing, but there was a lot of also inconsistency growing up, right? Moving away, it was a culture shock. I was in Nogales until I was 10, then we went to Chandler, then we came back when I was older. So that was a whole traumatizing event too, the socioeconomic class. We weren't up to par to that. So there's a lot of things that impacted me that I didn't know how to regulate my emotions. I didn't know how to function without numbing myself. And I think I also grew up with anxiety most of my life. And I was trying to cover that. And that was traumatizing as well. Before, if you would have known me and I was trying to talk, I would be sweating. I would stutter because I couldn't express what I wanted to say, right? And then, of course, in substance, losing my kids because I was using, all of these other things that we live in substance. So it's stuff that just really impacts you, that you can't function and you can't move forward, and you keep on going back to that place. It keeps on going back to that and back to that.
Yeah. So timeline. So you were in Mexico, you left, and you said you weren't ready. What happened then for you?
I was living in Nogales. I was living with my grandparents. I was going to school, interestingly enough, at the building where we were doing the conversations. And I was talking about this yesterday. I relapsed. This was back in 2015. I relapsed, so I was going to school. So yesterday, I went into the restroom. That smell came back instantly. And I was like, oh my goodness. I used this, and I did it on purpose. I used the same stall where I would sit there and use and try to go to class, because I said, look at how life puts things in front of us, right? I was able to face something that maybe I didn't even remember or think of, but it really did impact me. I ended up leaving school. I ended up just going into full-blown use, and my grandparents ended up having to kick me out. I was getting in all sorts of trouble. I was doing illegal stuff, crossing drugs back from Mexico, and I ended up catching charges. That was my first felony charge for crossing drugs back from Mexico.
So then the result of that was having to go to prison?
I was going through the courts. I was still using. I was just passing by. I tried treatment. I would leave. And at this time,
did you have an opportunity for diversion at that point, to have drug court and?
It wasn't. So this is where I hadn't learned about the whole SUD thing. I was in services, but again, I wasn't ready. I was just trying to go to services because they would give us food and it would be something to do. So I wasn't taking it for what it was. I wasn't investing myself in it.
Yeah, so that word readiness comes up, right? You have to be ready.
And I was still trying to play the system.
Yeah.
So I thought that by writing letters or saying that I was going to treatment for a little bit was just buying me more time. And I was placed on probation. I was placed on probation and I violated 1 month in. I relapsed, I couldn't do it. And another big part of my story is that I was pregnant at this time. So I relapsed while I was pregnant. And that's when the first day that I feel like it impacted me was when I went to court. I was supposed to be put on a higher level of probation. And the judge said, and I always remember this, a fellow peer support took me to court. And the judge said, your child doesn't have a voice, so I'm going to be the voice for your child. And he sentenced me to 1.5 years in the Arizona Department of Corrections. And that was the first moment when I surrendered.
Yeah.
I remember that. I was 7 months pregnant. I remember the guy that was talking to me and he was taking off my necklaces and bracelets. And so I went to court. I was 7 months pregnant. And again, I thought I was going to be sentenced to a higher level of probation. And the judge said, your child doesn't have a voice, so I'm going to be the voice for your child. I got sentenced to 1.5 years in the Arizona Department of Corrections. And that was the first moment that I surrendered. They were bringing me back into the room, and I was just sitting there. And there wasn't any more emotional tears. There was not that baggage. It was okay. But I had never done that before. That's why it's so impactful. I was always crying and making a ruckus. Even when they told me I was going to get a higher level of probation, I remember in the probation office breaking down and crying and saying, no, I can't do that. And that's what led them to making the decision that my child wasn't in danger. I relapsed. Even though I was a couple of weeks sober that time, I had relapsed throughout my pregnancy, and that was my consequence.
So when he said, I'll make the decision, he was thinking about the health of the baby.
Yes.
So that's really interesting. So for you, when you say that's the first time I surrendered, what does that mean for you when you use that word surrender?
I stopped fighting myself. The whole process of getting on probation, I was trying to go into treatment just enough to miss the court so they wouldn't see me that I was high. I was writing these letters with these fake templates from the old rehab that I was in, that I was there, my progress. I went to a halfway house for 3 weeks and detoxed, and all of these things that just led me through it. That was before I found out I was pregnant. Then when I was pregnant, I did detox, I relapsed, and then I detoxed again. So it was never consistent. And that's why I'm getting to the point where I still didn't understand SUD. Did I know I had a problem? Probably. I kept on seeing it. And that's why I have an issue with rock bottom.
Yeah.
Everybody else could have been seeing and said, isn't this enough? I think my grandma said, can you stop doing this to us? It was 5 holiday season Christmases that I was either in rehab, I had just told her I was pregnant, I had relapsed, they were having to visit me in Mexico in the rehab, and none of that stuff had registered.
Yeah.
My older girls were already in the custody of my grandma and my mom. I also, this is something that I don't touch upon a lot, but I think it's appropriate. I have a son that I gave up for adoption because I used the entire pregnancy in 2014, 2013 to 2014. I used that entire pregnancy. He was born addicted. I was using heroin and I was put on methadone the last month. At that point, I knew that there was no way I was going to be able to care for this child, and I wanted to give him a better life, right? So I made that decision in that spurt of being sober for, again, 2 months.
Yeah.
Then I would relapse again and relapse. All of that stuff was not enough. So why I have an issue with it is because somebody else from the outside in, especially in my culture, is your kids should be enough.
Right.
I would never do that to my children and stuff that I've heard. How could you do that? You're supposed to love them. That's what my role is supposed to be, a Susie homemaker at home, raising my children and just knowing how to make all this great food. That wasn't my story. So my initial thing when I surrendered was that moment when I was in prison. There was no more fighting. I couldn't escape that prison cell. I couldn't escape that sentence.
Yeah.
It was something that was formalized that said, okay, there's no evading this. There's no using manipulation to get around this.
Yeah.
I was there and I was going, and that was it.
So you still could have made that choice. This is where choice comes in. And you said that's the first time you understand substance use disorder and what that means. So there's
Right.
two things I want to talk about. But you still had a choice to say, yeah, okay, I'll do this for a year and a half. But not everybody does the hard work when it's that's presented to them. You said you were ready, you understood it. Tell me about that choice. What did that mean for you?
So that second moment, or like that awakening, I like to
Yeah.
call it, was once I was registered, I was in there, I got to the place where I was going to be housed, and I remember just seeing like this flood of people, women,
Yeah.
right? And from all natures, all cultures, all backgrounds, and that's when I can look back and I'm like, what were you doing? You thought you were so, this is me talking to myself, like you thought you were so tough. You knew all of the ways of the world. I was playing drug dealer here, crossing drugs from Mexico, on the streets, homeless at times, putting myself in such dangerous situations. And I sat there and I was like, you have no idea what's in this world.
Wow.
You have no idea, because of the stories and the backgrounds. There was women serving serious time. There was women serving serious time for serious charges. I got to be on a yard and I was with people that were lifetime sentences. And that's when I said, okay, I have a choice. Either I choose this life and I'm gonna come back to prison,
Yeah.
because I understood a little bit more about the process, because I have priors that I would have gotten sentenced to prison. I'm no longer probation eligible because I ruined that. And I said, okay, if I keep on doing this, I'm going to use drugs when I get out. I'm going to lose Santiago because I'm going to use drugs. Or I can really give this a shot, like having a life, trying to be a person. And that's how I spent my time.
Yeah.
I did a lot of changing in there. I quit smoking cigarettes so I didn't have to go outside and associate with people. Not that there's anything wrong with them. I tried to do more on my time and spend it alone. I also had to learn how to detach from the outside world, because if I cared too much about the outside world, that would have flooded me and I wouldn't have been able to focus on me. And
Okay, so what does that mean, the outside world? Like your family, your children, like...
right, on all of that. Like when you get, at least for me, when I would get sober and I would stop using, all of a sudden I had emotions. All of a sudden I cried for my kids. All of a sudden I needed to have a job. I needed to get out there, and I was trying to say sorry to my mom, make amends with the whole world,
was
write them
overwhelming.
letters, just trying to fix everything.
Yeah.
So I had to also make that choice. Like, I can't fix anything in here.
Yeah.
It's out of my control. I can't live this time, this year and a half, sad and heartbroken. And did it get to me? Yes, at times, of course. But I had to set that aside. And that's one thing that I think can be a positive thing, but it can also be a negative thing. Because to come back out and turn on those emotions takes a lot of inner work.
Yeah.
Because I paused all of that. I detached from it. So now that's another challenge in recovery. How can I be emotionally engaged with everybody that's around me?
Okay, so how can you? What are the tools that you use? What skills have you learned? How do you sort of navigate that hard path?
So I think it started once I got out.
Yeah.
Once I got out, I got back into services in a peer-run agency, and I started connecting. I started connecting with other people that were in recovery, so then I could learn how to express myself. Because if I was at home and I said I have thoughts of using, or I'm stressed and I'm triggered, that would have brought in everybody into a flight mode, like frightened mode. She's about to leave. That was my track record.
Right.
My track record was being there, leaving, being there, leaving.
Right.
So I started learning how to connect with other peers in recovery and being honest. If I'm talking to a peer in recovery, I can say, and this is gonna sound like a harsh statement, like, I don't feel like I love my kids today. And I don't know how to deal with that. And I don't feel like I'm loving myself very much, and I kind of hate what I'm doing. So how can you help me? Have you gone through this? And then like, oh, okay, giving that feedback and having those raw conversations. That's another part that I think has helped me heal the emotional detachment, is having those really tough conversations. Like, I've had a couple weeks where I don't know what I'm going to do with my life. I'm depressed. I'm having these symptoms. I'm living trauma again. I'm activated. I call it like a trauma activation.
Yeah.
And I can't deal with myself. What can I do? Right.
So peers are a support, or have been a support. What other things have been supportive for you?
Reconnecting with my family, building those bridges. I have never had a relationship like I've had with my mom. I'm 31 years old, and I think the past, Esmeralda's going to be one, I think the past year and a half, mine and my mom's relationship has flourished. I could say it's a mother-daughter relationship. The unexpected pregnancy with Esmeralda. She's 9 months old now, and that has taught me how to be a mom. That's another stigma that I face. What do you mean? You have 4 kids. How do you not know how to be a mom? Well, I didn't. I've had to learn all of that stuff. When I got out of prison, I learned how to be a mom to Santiago. And that first year, I faced a lot of stigma because I was supposed to be in the home taking care of him because I was gone for a year. If I didn't invest that year to my recovery, to programming, to meetings, to exercise, I was doing Zumba, to volunteering, to getting my peer support, all that stuff that I did in that first year was fundamental. My kids today would not have a mom. And that's why I don't regret that. My bond with Santiago started in the second year that I was out. And I built that and I created it, and that's what's helped me, just taking that time and now actually understanding, hey, I have an addiction. It's a disease. Okay, my whole brain is different. Its function's different, and I probably can't even feel the same things other people are feeling because I've kind of done some damage there, right? So it's taking it slowly and saying, okay, this is probably a part of it. I'm having a really bad day, a really bad couple days. I'm emotionally reacting instead of thinking things through. So how can I work on that?
So this is a process of building all of those skills and having grace.
A cognitive part of that, restructuring my whole belief system, my whole understanding of who I was, of what I need to be doing versus what I want to be doing. That part has really, really helped me.
Tell me a little bit about what stigma has maybe blocked or gotten in the way of your success, or even now, things that maybe have an impact on you, or what you see in terms of with peers. Any thoughts? Really?
I think that one of the cultural things, and I mentioned it a little bit, is I'm a mom, I'm supposed to be taking care of my kids, I'm supposed to be focusing all on that, but that doesn't work in my life full time. Now it's different. I'm in a different stage, so I can focus more on that. But if I have to work on myself and my recovery. So that part.
So the expectations of other people.
Right. Is in being a mother in recovery. Right. Another stigma is just the women, being a woman in recovery. Sometimes I'm very outspoken in the way I speak and I express myself. That's where it's like, oh, you need to be calm. Like, you need to not be speaking that way. And I'm very outspoken. I face that stigma. And just in the community in general, there's a lot of stigma with the medications. With medications here. We only have, this is the first time that we have a methadone clinic here in Nogales. We only have one. There's stigma for that. We're barely getting into, the past couple of years have been with the medically assisted treatment or MOUD and all of that stuff. So there's a lot of stigma to, you are taking medication, so you're not really into recovery.
Okay, so a judgment, that's that judgment about using medically assisted treatment or MOUD isn't really being sober. Is that the word? What kind of words would we?
Yeah, you're still getting high. You're still getting high. You're not really taking it serious and stuff like that. Another thing too is just the belief system around recovery and services. I've heard it, like where I used to work is ahí van los locos. Like, that's where the crazy people are. We don't go there. No. A lot of people don't want to go to meetings held there because you're going into where the locos are. Right? So there's a lot of stigma also. Let's say I'm working, but I have to do services because of something. I'm on probation. A lot of people don't want to come to services because there's still a lack of understanding of what substance use disorder is.
Right.
It's a vaquetonada. It's a vicio. You're just doing it because you want to. You can stop whenever you can. I've heard I'm gonna lock you in a room until you stop using drugs. That's like the macho. I'm gonna lock him in a room until he stops, and he's gonna get the hang of it. And it's like, okay, try that, but it's.
I think it's come up, responsibility. You just need to take responsibility. Ayer.
Right.
Yeah. That if you could just, I'm going to lock you in a room, I'm going to force you, but it's really, you made that decision at some point. You made that choice, but you had support system. So what were the support systems that you had along the way that maybe helped you into recovery, but keep you going today?
The big one is the peer support.
Yeah.
The peer support since before. So since I would say that I didn't understand it and I was just kind of going to services and everything, there's been peer supports that have really stuck by me, that have been there and that have watched me grow and that are still supporting me today. So that's part of like my nucleus of people that I know are going through things that I can count on, that I can talk to whenever things aren't going that great anymore. Because it also becomes a barrier. We used to do something here locally that we would engage in, and then it became a barrier because it's such a small community that the members that we were working with were going to the same place, and then it was like a conflict of interest. So where do we get our recovery, right?
Okay.
So that kind of had to stop. A lot of the people that I knew from before that we're using are now in recovery, but they are receiving services, and then I became the provider. So where's that middle ground? I also had to relearn boundaries.
Yeah.
Like, what do you mean I can't do this and I can't do that, right? And learning more of that ethical part that helped me, but understanding it because I was like, wait, well, who am I gonna surround myself with?
Right.
And slowly but surely I've created other relationships and the virtual platform. I mean, I follow so many people that are holistic psychologists or all of that stuff. So understanding that I don't have to be in a place specifically, of course I would benefit from it, but I can get a little bit of everything and form it into my own recovery. And that's what's helped. Before I would always try to copy what everybody else was doing.
So it's your path.
Right. I've created my own path, and I add to it, I take away from it, I do it a little bit different, and I add my own thing. And that's why it finally was successful, because Cassandra became Cassandra. I didn't know who Cassandra was at all. I was parts of this, I was the trauma, I was the mom that left, I was the addict, I was the junkie, I was the tweaker, all of these things. I couldn't be trusted. I never followed through. That was one of the things I would always like, yeah, right, you're gonna ask her for something, she's not gonna follow through. And now I'm slowly but surely, I'm following through for myself. So then all of that stuff falls into place. If somebody wants to be in my life and participate, then they are. And then with some people I've set boundaries, and it's a little bit from a further distance, because that can also be toxic as well. I don't have to fit into the nucleus of what was supposed to be of me. I'm now what I want to be, and if somebody likes it, then they can participate. If not, then I'm okay with that as well. I fell into people pleasing for many years, and I don't feel like I need that anymore.
So thinking about the future, where you are now, where you might want to be, what's your vision for yourself in the future? And that doesn't mean like I'm going to have this job, but just when you think about Cassandra, you now know Cassandra and who Cassandra is. In the future, what do you think?
So one of the things that I love is my school. You know, like that's part of me now. I want to continue school, and I see myself. This is just again my own little thing, but interesting fact. My grandma was a naturopathic doctor. Right, so she studies natural medicine, a lot of like the Chinese medicine and everything like that. I've gotten into a lot of like the internal healing and the holistic approach to recovery. I love my school part. I'm forever gonna love that part, but I want to get to a place where I can mend the intellectual scientific part, because I think that's valid, but I also would like to get to a part where it's like the holistic approach, the natural healing, meditation and all of that stuff, and incorporate that and get to a place where I can be helping other people and teaching them that.
Yeah.
I don't think I'm there yet because there's a lot of components to that. But when I get excited about something, it's that, the natural way of healing.
Yeah, beautiful.
If I think of my grandma's house, you would open cabinets and there was like all kinds of teas, and just as a kid, that's what I remember. She did massages, like deep healing massages, and then she did the eye.
Iridology.
Iridology, right? So she would always give us some sort of like nasty syrups or something like tinctures that we would put under our tongues.
Yeah.
And I didn't know what it was before. And I would call her, Grandma, what is this for? Okay, and she would tell me, like dandelion tea for your circulation, and I can't think of the names right now. Echinacea when we had a cold, and teas for this, and this medicine for this, arnica. So as I grew older, there's always been something in me that thinks that there is a scientific component, like I said, but I think we fall too deep on depending on that aspect and not doing the holistic approach.
Yeah.
So one of the parts that has really helped me in my recovery is understanding that there's more than one option.
Yeah.
Right? I'm sure I could benefit from medication. I'm sure I need some times for like depression, anxiety. I don't opt out of that, right? But when I really focus on myself and ground myself, use grounding techniques, visualization techniques, and say, okay, is this what it is? One of my go-tos, ashwagandha, teas, the reishi mushroom tea, and all that stuff, that calms my mood. I feel like there's a lot of stuff going on in the brain and in the gut as well, that if I can heal that, and in a perfect world, I would be eating this super healthy meals, and I would be taking all these teas and these supplements, because I do truly believe that can heal.
I think Zumba's healing.
Zumba, right?
Dancing.
Getting that out there, the energy.
Yeah.
And when I say holistic, it's not just the natural healing. Yeah. I think that spending time, genuine time with my family and my kids is healing. Laughing with a friend is healing. Finding something that I actually like to do, that I'm not just doing because I have to, is healing. Like my plants. My plants have helped me heal in a different aspect. Different things that I've tried to do, different things for the kitchen that I just make at home, that is healing as well. So finding that natural chemistry that can ignite through interactions, through connection, through maybe a tea, through reading a book, like all of that stuff in the lifestyle. But I do truly believe in natural medicine, and that has a great impact on what we're doing and how we're feeling.
Yeah, I think it sounds like just being present in life,
right,
and enjoying life, because you weren't present in life before, maybe.
Right. For a long time I was dormant. I was just living for, I don't know, I'm 31, take away 4 years, right? I finally started living back then, and now I don't take it for granted. Every day, even the bad days, I just don't take them for granted, because for so long I wasn't there. I wasn't there anymore. So it's not so much about trying to repair. My girls are where they're at. If I get too much into that, then I'm not going to be able to be present to where I'm at right now. So I let it be. That's the life. This is what's happening. And do I have my moments? Of course I do. But it goes back to that, like, okay, I have way more than I had 4 years ago. So what can I do to keep it? It's not even like what can I do to fix it. It's just what can I do to not lose all of these things that I've gained. And working on it that way.
So you've been in recovery for 4 years, and a big part of that change for you was going into the prison system. So you've had lots of experiences in the community, in and out of probation. What are the changes that you feel you've seen in the last 4 years? Either positive changes or negative changes, or things that that the community's working on?
So I think if I backtrack all that, like when I got sentenced to prison and everything like that, there was this idea that if you were on probation and you used, you would go to prison, right? There was not really any treatment. And I'm talking back in 2017, 2018. I think me going to prison, being on probation, sparked something. with the system. There was kind of more conversations, and it was like, why did she go to prison and she was pregnant, right? And there was that other side of the safety, and I need to stay alive, but there was a lot of conversations then. Something I don't know if I mentioned, but while I was still in custody, Santiago's father passed away by overdose. He was also on probation at that time. So then there was these conversations. Fentanyl was coming out, that we were seeing it, and then there was this overdose.
Yeah.
It's not that like that was the only overdose, but that was a very impactful one. Like, what could have happened different here? It was those conversations that started to be having. When I was going into prison, I had heard about the peer support training.
Yeah.
I had signed up for one. I went in, so I wasn't able to complete it. When I got out, I also got back into that. Like, there's this training that you can participate in, and you can do like what your lived experience can help you. In Nogales, I had never heard of that before, and I had been here since forever, right? So I had never heard of behavioral health. I had never heard of these services. It was when I was going through my DCS case that I was in the services, but there was never really that hope, like, oh, I can do this for a living.
Yeah.
I think the infrastructure has changed.
Yeah.
There's the SOSA consortium, right, that is being led, and all of the partner agencies are now working together to see, okay, this is the issue, how can we be part of the solution? We have prevention, we have recovery, then we have the EMT part, law enforcement. So everybody is coming together and talking about what is happening. That didn't happen before.
Yeah.
There's been so many events that have come out of this. There's been so much connection through it. The EMTs are now, the fire stations are now safe stations where people can go and find information because there was such stigma. What happened when an EMT got called to an overdose? They still didn't know how to respond, and it was like we were isolated from the community, even in myself, right? So there's been all of this connection, that power of the peer support, of getting out there and speaking the same language and saying like, hey, what's going on? I just saw you last week, or making that connection and not judging.
Yeah.
There's this less judgment. It's evolving because there's still so much stigma around services. And I think that's what was a great thing, to find a place where I felt like I could be myself, to find a place where I could flourish. Never did I think that I would be part of these community events or part of this movement. And by speaking out and sharing my story, I think that's where it has been so powerful. I'm sharing what I lived. I'm sharing what I went through, but I'm also not scared to share. Somebody said to me, and I stayed with this, I wear the crown of addiction proudly. Why? Because I know that I've gone through so much stuff, and if I share it, it can touch one person and they might be able to start understanding what they're going through. Because a lot of the times I don't think we could put name on what we're feeling, or name on where to go, or find the resources and lack of services, the culture and everything like that. So there's been a lot of movement here in Nogales, which a few years ago there was no peer support. There was no training. There was not a place where I might have even been able to get a job.
Yeah.
I'm a felon, right? That's a huge barrier. And to open up and say, okay, I felt like I could actually put like, oh, I've been in prison. Oh, yeah, I've used drugs for a lot of years. Oh, I've done all this. And I felt like that was actually going to help me get a job in these situations where everywhere else, I think the doors could have been closed. So as small of a community as we are, there's been a big movement through the consortium, through other partnerships, through the involvement of like the justice system. Probation now looks to divert, looks for these stories, this experience to say, how can we help you first? I've heard them say so many times, I'm gonna try everything that I can on my part until I have to make an arrest. Every single option that we have, we're gonna use it, and then we're gonna have to do our part, right? Because that's still their job. In the courts, there's a drug court now. There is a behavioral empowerment court. All over the states there's that, but we didn't have that until this past year. So there's that huge movement happening where there's awareness and there's education, and I feel like we're no longer like the outskirts of the community.
Yeah, you're part of the community.
Be part of the community.